In this video, we are going to take a look at washing our red blood cells and making a 3% suspension for our blood bank tube testing. So the patient had a pink EDTA tube drawn, and what I did was I spun the tube down and then I pulled off the plasma, which I put in a separate glass test tube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to make a new glass test tube in which we're going to wash and make our suspension. And as with all tubes in blood bank testing, it has to have an identification on it, what it is. So this patient's name is 14, so I'm just going to write 14 and then 3%. So I know what that is. Now I'm going to take another tube here and I'm going to write on that blank, because I'm going to need a blank tube for centrifuging, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. Alright, so from our EDTA tube, we're going to have to draw a little bit of those cells out on the bottom. So just take a disposable blood bank tube, and there's no exact amount we need to measure, just suck a little bit up. We're going to need about 3 drops. Alright, now go ahead and take saline. Make sure you're using saline and not water, because of course if you use water, the water is going to hemolyze your red cells and you're not going to be able to use it. So we're going to fill this about 2/3 to 3/4 full. I'm going about 3/4. Now I said before that we need a balanced tube, because anytime you centrifuge something, a centrifuge needs to be balanced. So I'm going to put about the same amount of water, or I'm sorry, saline, in this tube. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and centrifuge for 60 seconds. Okay, so we are done, or it is done spinning. And you can see here on the bottom of the tube, you know, it's clear on top and you have the cells on the bottom. So you can either get rid of the water on the top by taking a blood bank pipette disposable and just sucking that water off, or you can just dump it off. I'm going to go for the dump method here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get it mixed up. Get that off the bottom. Alright, now comes the tricky part. We have to put in the right amount of saline to make a 3% suspension. Now, I think most places would call it a 2 to 5% suspension. We just happen to call it a 3% suspension. But it's in that ballpark. So for this much blood, 3 drops, I'm going to start with filling the tube halfway with saline. Now, one thing you have to be careful about when you're pipetting or you're putting things in these tubes, is, especially if they have something else in it, you don't want to contaminate. So you can see that I'm being very careful about not putting the tip or touching the tip of this saline bottle to this tube, because there's blood in there and I don't want to contaminate the saline tube. Okay, so I can see, let's see, we're going to go a little bit more here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a disposable pipette. We're going to up and down a little bit, get it good and mixed up. Now, how do we determine if we have a 3% suspension? A good way to do that is to take from your reagent rack one of your cellular reagents. So we're going to use the B cells. And you should try to match your suspension with this suspension. So the way I do this is I go ahead and I, make sure that the B cells or the reagent cells are nice and mixed up, and then I make sure that the dropper is mixed up, and then I pull some blood up in the dropper, and that's what I use to measure. Okay, so based on what I see here, they look about right. All right, so at this point, you've gone ahead and made up your 3% cell suspension. Those cells are ready to use for testing. Now, keep in mind that whenever you let cells in a tube sit, the cells are going to settle. So before any time you use it, make sure you give it just a once or twice up and down just to get that good and mixed up, and then you can go ahead and use it.